Chairperson van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Ms. Niekerk.
There we go. The time is now 2 o'clock, sir. We may start.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and welcome to this meeting of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Today is Tuesday, the 8th of December 2020, 1400 hours. My name is Enrique van der Wester and I'm the chair of this Standing Committee in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And I would like other members just quickly to introduce themselves to the meeting as well. Over to you, members.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Honourable Bartman. Welcome, Honourable Maseko.
Red Heron.
Welcome, Honourable Heron. Are there any other members joining us today? None for now. So thank you very much for introducing yourself, honourable members. Thank you for your attendance on what I expect to be our last meeting for this calendar year. A hearty word of welcome also to our MEC, Minister for Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, Mr. Anton Bredel, and then also, if I can just stick to the heads of department, Mr. Piet van Zyl, the head of the Department for Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, and then also hearty welcome to your team, sir, and then also to the Cape Nature board chairperson. I trust that Professor Denver Hendricks is with us, as well as the CEO, Dr. Hazina Omar. Ladies and gentlemen, in the light of the large delegation that joined us for this meeting today, I hope you will accept that we're not going to allow each and everyone to introduce themselves. And unless you've been called by name to participate, please, if not, I would appreciate it if you could identify yourself, particularly when you're going to take part in the proceedings for the first time here this afternoon. As you know, we are here today to deal with the annual reports by both the department and that of Cape Nature. And I'm looking forward to engaging with you on these reports, honourables as well as officials. Just quickly, we are first going to deal with the department's report and then with that of Cape Nature. And just a reminder that we will only be deliberating on parts A, B, and D of the annual reports, and that parts C, dealing with governance, and part E, the financial information, will be deliberated on at the SCOPA meeting, which is currently scheduled to take place on Tuesday, the 26th of January 2021, in the afternoon and into the evening from 15:30 until 19:30. Good. So without further ado, I would like to give over to our MEC just for a few introductory remarks. MEC Bredel, you're most welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members of the Standing Committee, the Head of the Department, and colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good afternoon. We are presenting the annual report for the Department of...
As you and the other members, Member Moran and Member Heron, I'm just quickly going to run through the questions and assign them, and then some of them I'm going to respond myself. Both Member Heron and Member Moran asked the question about the Commissioner for the Environment and the current status. I'll respond to that myself. Then Member Heron asked to be briefed on the Two Rivers Urban Park. Gerard Gerber will respond to that for us, and Gerard will also respond to the Development Facilitation Service and the land availability, land assembly project. Then I'm going to ask Johan Fritz to answer the second question regarding transfers to municipalities on the RCEP VPUU. And then Chairperson, the question of law enforcement and the components within the department and in Cape Nature. I'm going to ask Ayub Mohammed to respond to that question. I'll, with assistance if needed from Johan Fritz, answer your question on the continuation and the funding availability for the RCEP VPUU. Your question, Chair, on the Moodle and the e-learning platform. Karen Shippey and Ron Mukanya will speak to that, just to give you some brief background. On climate change, the international regional membership. I'm going to ask Karen with Hussein to perhaps just brief you on that, particularly also your question then of regional impact versus national. The National Natural Refrigerants Program with Bavaria, Joy Lena can brief you on that. The alternate building materials, I think Karen Shippey is probably the best person from the sustainability side to briefly talk to that. The Berg and Breda River programs, water quality programs, how successful have they been? Wilna Kloppers will speak to that. And then your last question in terms of indicator and indicated targets, I'll give some response to that, but also ask Ayub Mohammed to join me in that. So, Chair, to kick off the Part A, page 21, the Commissioner for the Environment. I think as recorded in the annual report, the amendment of the Western Cape Constitution process was not capable of being completed in the previous term. However, it's coincidental that on the day that we've got our annual reporting engagement with your standing committee, on today's cabinet agenda is in fact the item to request cabinet authorization to reintroduce the amendment to the Western Cape Constitution, which doesn't only deal with the provisions relating to the Commissioner for the Environment, but there are a number of other provisions to bring the Western Cape Constitution in alignment with our national constitution. So, in short, Chair, and I'm sure that with the Premier and Minister Bredell having signed off that cabinet submission, it will be passed by cabinet, and authorization given that once certified by legal services, the draft amendment bill will be submitted to, hopefully before the end of the calendar year, to the Speaker to take into the parliamentary process. So at that point, of course, it moves from the administration into Parliament, and the process thereafter is in your hands. It'll go to the Standing Committee for the Premier and Constitutional Matters, but Chair, it might be that on certain aspects of it, there would be participation by your Standing Committee as well, but that is the current status of the Commissioner for the Environment matter. I'm going to then move on to ask Gerard Gerber to speak to Two Rivers Urban Park and the Land Assembly item on page 67. Over to Gerard.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairperson, honourable members, Minister Bradell, HOD, and colleagues. Just in terms of the question about the Two Rivers Urban Park, that flows from agreement between the Department of Transport and Public Works as the custodian of the provincial land, together with the City of Cape Town in terms of the city's own land holdings, but also the city's responsibility as the municipal planning authority in terms of the local spatial development frameworks and their own municipal land use regulation to explore and follow a planning-led approach in terms of the broader Two Rivers Urban Park, approximately 300 hectare precinct. And there the first body of work in terms of deliverable was to work with the city in terms of that process of reviewing the previous work that was done, and to then, as decided by the executive mayor, that work had to be updated in the form of a new local spatial development framework for that area. And from environmental affairs and development planning side, to look at how do we, as we do the development facilitation, regulatory facilitation, in terms of those regulatory processes and permit processes that are with our department, in terms of ensuring fair and transparent and open and just administrative action, but specifically also the co-regulation with the city, where some of the permit decisions lie with the city, for instance, the municipal planning decisions. So that was for the Two Rivers Urban Park. It was but one of a number of strategic programs as agreed with the city in Transport and Public Works. Then to turn to the Land Assembly Development Facilitation work with the Department of Human Settlements, in terms of Honourable Member Heron's question, in particular in terms of the Informal Settlement Support Program. Our department have been supporting the Department of Human Settlements and the municipalities in that space, in terms of firstly making sure that the spatial development frameworks are enabling as a critical part of a municipal integrated development plan, and then within that to make sure that there are credible and aligned integrated human settlement plans, and then from that pipelines for delivery of integrated human settlement projects. Part of that focus in particular was the Informal Settlement Support Program, where there were 60 informal settlements that were prioritized, and there was a categorization process followed in terms of which of those settlements are to be upgraded incrementally, which are potentially to be relocated, and based on that initial work with the municipalities in consultation with the communities, our department then assisted with exploring the different regulatory options in terms of giving effect and taking forward that informal settlement upgrading work. And more than half of the 60 informal settlements were already dealt with in the 2019-20 financial year. So those are those two questions. Back to HOD Van Zyl. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerard. Chairperson, if we then move to, I think those three responses deal with Member Heron's questions, and also the first question from Member Moran. The second question from Member Moran was in respect of the transfers on the RCEP program and the unspent part, particularly Saldanha Bay and Witzenberg. Johan Fritz.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, members, and Minister. On the RCEP transfers to the municipalities, the member is correct in his observation that we're dealing with two different financial years for these transfer payments. So what is recorded in the annual report of the department is the spending by the municipalities as at the 31st of March 2020. But in the meantime, the municipalities still are able to spend until the end of June of that of 2020. So they continue to incur expenditure on those particular projects that were approved. Then there is, in terms of the members' question, there is a rollover process, quite a stringent rollover process. So the municipalities need to apply to retain the funds that they haven't spent at the end of their financial year. Some of the conditions include that the tenders should have been advertised and closed by the 31st of March. The contractors should have been appointed and they should have been on site already by the end of June, or the procurement processes in terms of the appointment should have already been concluded. But evaluation committees should have already met. And then the municipalities need to indicate the ability also then to complete the projects within the next financial year. So the municipalities did submit their request in terms of Swartland. They submitted a request for 3.186 million for rollover. That request has been considered by the department and the recommendation was made to the Provincial Treasury, and that amount was approved. Witzenberg, an amount of 4.067 million was requested as a rollover, and that amount was considered by the department and recommended to Provincial Treasury for approval. And then Saldanha, there were two amounts for Saldanha, 4.2 million and a 1.5 million. That was requested by Saldanha Municipality for rollover. Both those amounts were recommended by the department for consideration to Provincial Treasury for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Chairperson, I think that deals with Member Moran's question. If we then continue with your series of questions, Chairperson. Firstly, the law enforcement components in the department in Cape Nature. Ayub Mohammed will respond to that for us.
Thank you, HOD. Good afternoon, Chairperson, members, Minister. Currently, because of the way the legislation is set up and the way we implement the legislation, it's not possible for us to have a combined enforcement unit, but it is something that we should consider in the future. Perhaps when the Provincial Biodiversity Act is promulgated, we'd be able to consider that. So currently, the main reason why we are operating separately is because of the legislative mandates which the two organizations implement. But we will take this under consideration when we do an organizational design for the department in the future. Thank you, HOD.
Thank you, Ayub. Chairperson, then your question about the RCEP funding. And yes, you're correct in observing that the German Development Bank grant funding for the VPUU component of the program came to an end in the year under review. However, the RCEP component is continuing, and certainly what has happened, partly in terms of the financial re-engineering due to adjustment budgets, and there having been two, as you know, in the current year, and then also the preliminary allocations for the 2021 MTEF period. The re-cash flow that has been consequential to having to introduce certain budget and fiscal targets into our budget programs has resulted in the funding remaining available over the 2021 MTEF period. In other words, the next 3 financial years, there will be funding available to continue with the regional socioeconomic program part, which is the one where we have built up internal capacity. And one trusts that because there has also been an organization design process which was completed during the period under review to institutionalize the RCEP project office. So, Chair, I think in short, provision has been made to continue with this very important and I think flagship program into the next 3 financial years at least, and hopefully beyond that, because it is a transversal program across provincial departments, but also a very important intergovernmental program with 13 beneficiary municipalities participating in that at the moment. If I then move on, Chair, to the e-learning and Moodle and page 26, ask Karen and Ron to come in and address you on that.
Thank you very much, HOD. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honourable members, MEC, and my colleagues. Thank you so much for the question. It's a fantastic program, and I'm going to actually ask Ron Mukanya to talk about it because he's had direct contact with the recipients, the teacher recipients. Ronald.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, honourable members. Good afternoon, ministers. Afternoon, HOD, and good afternoon, colleagues. To answer the 2 questions that were raised, yes, the e-learning Moodle platform is very popular, and the reasons being it's a South African Council of Educators SACE accredited intervention. So teachers get continuous professional development points from being involved with the initiative. So that brings the first aspect of popularity. Then the second aspect relates to the fact that we've made the lives of our educators a lot easier by developing readily made teaching materials and resources that they can use when they are teaching science in schools. And we've targeted mainly our under-resourced and less privileged schools within the province. So as a result of that as well, the demand that we're getting for the need for it has sort of surged. And thirdly, it's a program which we're working very closely with our colleagues from the WCED, and we are part of the teacher training calendar that the WCED puts out to all the educators. So I think there's an incentive for educators to benefit and make use of the resources and the materials that we've developed. So I think from those 3 points that I've highlighted, I think the popularity would understandably be very high and the demand and interest as well. Then from an integration point of view, yes, we've pretty much developed these materials in line with the CAPS curriculum. So it relates to the everyday lessons that our educators need to be teaching the learners in class or in school. As a result, I think by virtue of that, the integration has happened, and the development of these resources and materials was done in conjunction with our curriculum specialist colleagues from the WCED as well. So we've made sure that we are addressing the curriculum needs as set out in CAPS. And by virtue of that happening, it then means that we are singing, I think, from the same hymn sheet with our colleagues from WCED. And that's it from my side in response to all the questions that were raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And I think obviously it's come into its own during the COVID period. Those schools that were able to still continue with e-learning definitely were able to benefit. I think probably the saddest thing about this project is that because of budget constraints, we've had to slow down how many teachers we train each year onto the system. So we're going district by district, but it is taking us a lot longer than we would like. In terms of the regional planning space around climate change and whether or not regions can make a difference, I think something that's emerged over the last couple of years is that federal governments don't always make the right choices. And this came very, very strongly out of the United States of America with their existing president and his withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. And really a sense that actually the impacts of climate change are happening at a local level and they're happening at a regional level. So one of the strongest proponents of this, and in fact the originator of the climate group, which is the regional entity that we are signed up to, it supports the idea that states and regions should take their own action to protect their citizens. And it's something that's also now starting to demand of federal and national governments that they take a slightly more practical view of what they promise at a national level. So in fact, the originators of this are Californian, and you just have to look at what's been happening to them recently in terms of their ongoing drought and the terrible fires that they've been having. There's a lot of similarity with what Western Cape has been going through. So certainly from a political perspective, the idea of regions getting active and motivated and actually demanding their own say in how we respond means that we're taking a very active role in how we adapt for the climate change impacts that we are experiencing. So it doesn't land up becoming an average response that's been flattened over the experiences. It's actually something that can be informed by your local responses. So we've actually been engaging this year in particular, even during the pandemic, we've been engaging online with a lot of other regions across the world who've been integrating this into their policies and processes as well. And it's fascinating the very different approaches that are being adopted. And they are very specialist to whatever the industry is of that particular area, the receiving environment, etc. So there's a lot of opportunity for learning and growth. And we also find that there's a lot of sharing from professionals at a regional level. Just then to touch on the natural refrigerants, our work has been fantastically done by our air quality team, and Dr. Joy Lena has been guiding us there, working together with Germany, because our natural refrigerants don't have as much impact on greenhouse increases as the refrigerants that many of us currently use. So moving on to the natural refrigerants has a massive impact for our climate change footprint, our greenhouse gas footprint, and that's work that is being done, as I said, with Germany. In terms of the municipal building regulations, obviously that's not something that we control directly, but Mr. Chair, I'm sure you'll be happy to know that there are 2 SANS codes. So the South African National Standards have come out with a SANS 204 and SANS 10400, and those specifically speak to new buildings and retrofitting of old buildings. So this is in particular giving guidance and quite specific standards for energy efficiency, water efficiency, etc. Those obviously need to be then communicated into the municipal bylaws, and certainly that has started happening. For City of Cape Town, one of the strongest changes that's happened in the last few years is in fact their water bylaw, which requires things like on-site fire water, as well as alternative water access points for new builds. So obviously we've got a lot of existing buildings that aren't currently being retrofitted, but eventually the entire building stock will need to have actually retrofitted itself to be able to meet these standards. In terms of using potable water for irrigation, especially at schools, it depends very much on two things. One, the quality of the effluent water that's available from that particular municipality and whether or not they can actually make it available to the institution. And then there are requirements from the National Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation about the quality. So can it actually be sprayed? Is it going to be a health risk? So taking all of those factors into account, we certainly from provincial level are encouraging and supporting the reuse of treated effluent, but it needs to be done very carefully so that we make sure that there's not a health risk. And I think that's it, HOD, from our side. I believe I've answered the questions.
Thank you, Karen. I would ask perhaps just for a slight amplification on the Bavarian joint project on the refrigerant and air cooling. Joy, perhaps you can amplify that.
Thank you, HOD. Good afternoon, Chairperson, honourable members, Minister and colleagues. In terms of the RAC project, it's the refrigeration and air conditioning project. It's really an exciting project that started in 2017 with Bavaria, and it's in terms of the action plan that was signed between the Western Cape government and the Free State of Bavaria. So the project has actually grown so much and such exciting work that is happening there. I'll talk very little bit about it, but it's really exciting and I get very excited about it. But in terms of the greenhouse gases from that sector, currently the contribution globally is about 3%, but if it's unabated, meaning that if nothing is done and we continue using the CFCs and the HFCs, these greenhouse gases in our in the RAC sector, then it will basically increase to 13% of the greenhouse gases by 2030. It has been estimated by Bavaria. And so this engagement with Bavaria is really in terms of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, where South Africa is a signatory to the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And we've also ratified the Kigali Amendment, which means there's international commitments. And so in terms of reducing greenhouse gases to the environment. And so we also very closely work with the National Department of Environmental Affairs and or DEF. We work very closely with them in terms of the international goals in terms of climate change. And the exciting part of this now, we've had 9 people trained in Bavaria, where Bavaria actually covered the training of South Africans going abroad for 2 weeks. And the only thing the South Africans need to do is get themselves to Bavaria and everything is then covered. So there's that training in terms of green cooling technologies. And the idea is that they come back into South Africa and train others. And so that brings me now to the training part, where we have going forward now, we've got a pilot project with TVET College in the Western Cape, where that type of training of technicians to implement green technology in the RAC sector will, that training is now, it's not being offered yet, but the plans are now in place in terms of going that route. And we've also had, as part of that project, on World Refrigeration Day, a workshop on energy efficiency in the RAC sector. So all this is happening at the local level here, or in the Western Cape. But as Karen has indicated, local and regional action is very important, and the local response has been very important in terms of climate change. Then we also do, in terms of World Ozone Day, we also link our activities on the RAC program to these international days where we give recognition to the RAC sector in terms of the contribution that the green cooling technologies will have, and then the saving would be the energy efficiency as well. So at the end of the day, every little bit of action in terms of climate change mitigation helps. So that's my from my side. Thanks, HOD.
Thank you, Joy. Chair, I think the 2 remaining questions from your set was the Berg and Brede River water quality interventions, and really the question, how successful are they, or have they been? I'm going to ask Gottlieb and Wilna to address that, and then I'll, together with Ayub, will talk to your last question. Gottlieb and Wilna.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, members, Minister, HOD. Wilna can go directly into the response, Chair, in terms of the water quality and the results which we're getting from there. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson and members and Minister colleagues. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. We are very excited about this work, so I'm going to try and be short. The Berg and Brede catchment program started with the Berg in response to the risk that was posed to the agricultural export market in terms of poor water quality. So that's where it was born, and then the Berg River Improvement Plan came about as a response by the Western Cape government, a transversal response to address the issues and the sources of pollution, basically. So it is at its heart, it is a stewardship program meant to address and improve water quality and the health of the river systems. So there are a number of tasks that were identified based on the sources of pollution. So it is quite a comprehensive plan. It looks at a few things I can mention, not only water quality monitoring, but also looking at upgrading of wastewater treatment works, looking at informal settlements, looking at good practice in agriculture, and then also focusing on the resource itself. It looks at the riparian zone and restoring that to ensure the proper functioning, and then also looking at costing and pricing of water management. And later on, we also realized that another task to look at two other tasks, one focused on tourism and also on ensuring the ecological integrity of the water resource itself. So we started in Berg River, and then that was also expanded to the Brede River catchment, because these two catchment are quite important in the Western Cape for economic development. It provides water for the Greater Cape Town area and agriculture. So that is where the priority comes from. Is it successful? Yes, definitely. I think it's not, we knew it was not going to be a sprint. We knew this was going to be a marathon, and it has a 40-year time scale of trying to improve water quality. The river has been abused for many, many years, and there are still water quality impacts. So we did not expect the river to be clean after 5 years, but we certainly do see an improvement. And I think our water quality monitoring programs that are established within both those catchment are really valuable tools to improve the management also, together with the other projects happening. There are quite a number of projects. I won't go into it now, but it's quite exciting, the work that we do as a department, but transversally also coordinating a focus from other departments such as Department of Agriculture, DLG, Human Settlements, other departments that also contribute towards the work being done in these catchments. And I think if I could just mention also that a formal evaluation was done on the Berg River Improvement Plan in 2018-19, and it found, if I could just mention one thing, that BRIP is an important and highly relevant programmatic response and has regularly brought together key government stakeholders, improving information sharing and coordination. It addresses the central water resource challenges, and some of which overlap with the national level government and other departments. So it has been recognized as a really important response to the work we do. And I think the value of it, apart from bringing different programs and projects together and working together and optimizing everybody's resources is also the fact that it attracts further. The more work we do and the more it gets known, the more it also attracts other information and other funding mechanisms. So there's been a number of projects and investments happening through SANBI, through GEF, through other mechanisms into those catchments that all then improve that. There's been a lot of focus on the Upper Breede with alien clearing, where we've really focused our interventions and managed to, together with other partners, clear most of the Upper Breede up to the N1, which is really a remarkable achievement that we've done, and some restoration there, so that also a healthy river is able to filter pollution into the river and improve that. It can assist with droughts, it can assist with floods, it can absorb floods. So I mean, I don't need to educate you on the importance of healthy river systems. So yes, we still have water quality issues, and the monitoring helps us to focus on addressing those matters that are still problematic. There are still water quality problems downstream of many of the urban areas, definitely downstream of informal areas, but that also helped us to start working with really innovative interventions in some of those areas. Unfortunately, budget is always the limiting factor, but yeah, it is a long-term projects, both of these, and with a number of project interventions that we hope would continue, and it has been very successful to date, and hopefully in future we have been able to show improved marked improvement in water quality in the Upper Berg area also. I should mention that with the decommissioning of the old Franschhoek wastewater treatment works, and that has been a permanent improvement. So managing the discharges from those wastewater treatment works just shows that doing that correctly and ensuring compliance with the requirements will definitely also improve water quality. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Volnap. Chair, I would perhaps just add one comment on the rivers, and that is that the methodology that has been used and improved upon over the last 6-7 years that we have been going is intended, when resources and budgets are available, to also roll it out to the third major catchment, the Olifantsdoorn, up the West Coast area. Chair, if I then come to the last question of the first round, your question about indicators and targets, and why sometimes year on year there's a reduction in targets. Perhaps two responses from my side. I'm going to ask Ayub to perhaps join me as well in trying to respond. The first is that it's not an ad hoc process of selecting to have a downward adjustment. It really does take account of anticipated workflow or work rate. Secondly, the reality of budgets and posts, in other words, staffing resources. And then thirdly, also the anticipated number of applications. For instance, Section 24G applications or voluntary applications. And therefore one is dependent on demand side, as it were. But so there's, I think, an attempt to be scientific in terms of looking at trends and applying that. But then secondly, there's it's not as if the department just does it quietly in a corner, because, as you know, the process is that the annual indicators are contained in the annual performance plan, which gets presented and is interrogated by the standing committee in March every year. And then once approved by Parliament, that is what our quarterly performance reporting is measured against. And then obviously at the end of the 4 quarters, the annual report assessment. So there is a fairly robust, I would say, monitoring, review and oversight process. So it's not a one-sided process. But Ayub, do you, just on the trends and how we sometimes do adjust downwards from your perspective?
Thank you, HOD. Yes, Pete, there's not much to add, except to say that also our targets are set for 3 years in terms of the MTSF and the MTF. So those targets are known to anybody reviewing the documents. And it's not that we sit down every year and then adjust downwards. The demand-led targets, it's quite important that we depend on the number of applications that comes through. Where the targets are set as absolute values, as the numbers, it's easy to see, but some of the targets are also set as percentages. So the percentage waste management license, for example, you don't actually see there the number of applications or the downward trend or the upward trend, so it works both ways, but the department is required to respond to that. So it's hidden, the numbers received is hidden behind the percentages. And then the other aspect is just that we do have norms, for example, that if we've only got so many resources available, notwithstanding the number for program 3, for example, notwithstanding the number of complaints that we receive, we can only investigate so much because that is only the capacity that we have available. And then where we do overachieve, even though when the target has been reduced, is you might have additional resources being employed during the financial year. So posts get filled, which wasn't available at the beginning of the year, or we get additional contract workers. And like in the case of Program 3, the Sanby contractor, the Sanby partnership, which gave us an additional 3 officers to attend to matters. And in that sense, we didn't have that at the beginning of the year. So when we do get those partnerships, the numbers then increase. But it's not that we decrease the numbers to be able to meet the targets. And then lastly, these targets are also assessed by the National Department of Environmental Affairs, because we do comply with the National Sector Plan. So there is, like HOD said, there is quite a bit of oversight into the target setting, and we don't just do that to be able to meet the targets. Thank you.
Chairperson, I think according to my notes, we've attempted to respond to all 3 sets of questions. So back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Zyl. Honourable members, are there any further questions or any follow-up questions that you would like to put to Mr. Van Zyl and his team? I do not see any hands being raised. Then, Mr. Van Zyl, just 2 last questions. The first one regarding probably biodiversity, and I don't know if I must hold this over for Cape Nature, but both of these were mentioned in your annual report. The first one, and I see Honourable Maseko's hand, I'll come to you now. The first one is this threat from the wood borer beetle, which seems to be especially prevalent in the Southern Cape. Perhaps if you could just tell us, how that fight is progressing, and whether we should step up on our efforts to identify the presence of these beetles. And the second one that you've also mentioned, and that was mentioned on page 45, I think on behalf of our alternate member, Peter Marais, who is quite interested in bee farming. Perhaps you can just tell us, I see there you've got what you call a plan B. What work has been done, and what is the current state of the Cape honeybee, which has been under threat from various angles, be it pesticides, be it the wildfires, and also at one stage there was this American foul brood disease. What is the current state of our Cape honey industry then? And then can I ask Honourable Maseko to also add her question before you respond?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think you covered my question, but the last one maybe, if I can just find out from the department, the WCG, RSCP, VPUU program, I just want to find out the impact. So far they have implemented in, I think, about 13 or 16 projects. The impact analysis to the communities, where is implemented? How does the department measure that impact to see those impoverished communities, if that program is working for them or not? Is it something that the department is going to take it forward? Because I see the target now has gone down from the last financial year, or it's something that was just ad hoc to see if it can add value to those impoverished communities. I think that's all that I have, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko. And with that, over to Mr. Van Zyl and his team again.
Chair, thank you. Regarding your two questions, the wood borer beetle and the bee farming, I'm going to ask Marlene Laras, and if necessary, might get some backup from our Cape Nature colleagues. And then I'm going to perhaps make one or two opening observations on Member Maseko's question, but ask Gerard Gerber and Francois Wist, our program manager, to perhaps add to my comments. So perhaps over to Marlene first on the two biodiversity questions.
Thanks very much, HOD, and thanks very much, Honourable Chair and members, colleagues, and Minister. In terms of the shot-hole borer, you may be aware that there were draft control measures published relating to its control in July this year, which we did comment on, and that is moving forward. It needed quite a few tweaks, which we have indicated, and there are protocols obviously within each region in terms of how any sightings need to be reported, specifically in terms of the Forestry and Biotechnology Institute and other institutes. So, for example, within Cape Nature, I know that they have distributed communications materials quite widely to indicate to people what to look for, how to identify and where to report such sightings, and then how to deploy teams within our national program, as well as within the city. We've got the city's own invading unit that will also attend to any identified areas. So our department has also, together with Cape Nature, participated in the national and the regional committees that have been responding to this and continue to do so. And then briefly on Plan B, as we've called it, looking to develop a wild bee conservation strategy for the Western Cape. That's been a project that's been ongoing for the last 2 financial years. The first phase really wanted to understand the threats to the honeybee populations, the wild populations specifically, and how they relate to the husbanded populations, in other words, within the bee industry. There's been a large number of engagements between those two sets of interests. There's a spectrum of views in relation to how things should happen and how honeybees should be managed, but absolutely, Chair, your identification of the use of pesticides is a major problem. Perhaps we can just also note that in relation to the economic value of bees, the significant value really rests in terms of the ecosystem services that they provide. In other words, the pollination services to our agricultural industry, onion seed, for example. But beyond that, the actual honey industry is quite small in relation to the economic benefit that comes from pollination. Yet it's a very important industry, and our interest there is to work together with the Department of Agriculture and our colleagues in our sister department, DDAT, to carry that strategy forward now. Unfortunately, we don't have funding in this coming financial year to drive that, and we are in-housing that project with the resources we have within the department. And then maybe just in closing, Cape Nature also has its own policy position in relation to bees and hives kept within protected areas, and also to protect the wild populations of bees. So while supporting industry, we don't want to enable the spread of pathogens within wild bee populations. We want to ensure as far as possible that we limit the capturing of wild bee populations. We find often that it's where we find, let's call them inconvenient swarming and hive establishment. Say, for example, in your water fire hydrant, they often tend to nest there. Beekeeper will tend to come and remove that, and that becomes a kept or a husbanded hive. But broadly speaking, we're trying to prevent we're trying to keep wild bees as far as possible protected from the pathogens that can spread from husbanded hives. And yeah, we'll be moving forward with the bee conservation, wild bee conservation strategy, what we call our Plan B, within the next financial year as well. Thanks, HOD. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thanks, Marlene. Chair, then turning to Member Maseko's question about the RCEP VPUU program, I'm going to perhaps just make one or two introductory remarks, but then, as I said, ask Gerard and Francois to expand on it. I think that the origin of this program, which has become a flagship program, not just for the department, but for the Western Cape government in terms of facilitating spatial transformation and using spatial targeting techniques to redress some of the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, was back in 2013-14 when the German federal government, through the German Development Bank, made available a grant of 5 million euros, which came with working with the implementing agent, the VPUU, Violence Prevention Through Urban Upgrading, not-for-profit company, which was a is a South African based company that had for about 10 years before then been doing work on the VPUU program in the city of Cape Town, and notably in Khayelitsha, but also other parts of the city. So using that methodology, establishing a small unit initially within our department, headed up by Gerard Gerber and Francois Wist, to really, as it were, learn the tricks of the trade from the VPUU team. And I think that was quite a beneficial partnership between the local agency and building up some expertise and capacity within our own department. The focus of it, of course, being implementing local implementation within our beneficiary municipalities. So the 5 million euros was principally allocated to do work in some follow-up work in the city of Cape Town, notably in Manenberg and Hanover Park, but then also in Drakenstein municipality and Theewaterskloof municipality. In parallel, we initially started off with the 5 beneficiary municipalities in the RCEP program, which was Saldanha Bay, Swartland and Breda Valley. And then we expanded that about 3 years ago, in other words, about halfway in the initial part of the program, to bring on board a further 7 municipalities, in other words, broadening it to 10 municipalities in which the RCEP program was then being implemented. And we have also picked up some new or additional projects in Drakenstein and Theewaterskloof that we are continuing with. The grant funding of the German Development Bank has been fully utilized. In fact, there was a little bit of change because with the, I suppose this is a case where the changing fortune of exchange rates was in our favor, because the 5 million euro, I think, was originally something like 70 odd million rand. It sort of incrementally grew through the exchange rate mechanism, almost by an additional 5 to 6 million rand. The last change, as it were, within that allocation has been fully utilized with some small COVID response community ECD projects, which are being implemented at the moment in the city of Cape Town. I think some good news for City of Cape Town and the communities is not an extension of the program, but the German government has provided a further 100 million rand grant to City of Cape Town for further ECD and feeding programs within the City of Cape Town. But that's a separate consideration. I think we're continuing to make use of the RCEP program as the Western Cape Provincial Government flagship program to facilitate, as I said, spatial transformation and spatial targeting. But perhaps Gerard and Francois can briefly expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. Then just to add to that, the projects are proposed by the municipalities, and those projects are in response to the community needs which flow from the municipal integrated development planning processes and the municipality's own processes of community engagement. And in terms of those processes also, you know, as we implementing with the municipalities, the feedback from the communities have been very positive. And not only in terms of the tangible infrastructure and spatial transformation projects, but also in terms of improved relationships with communities, specifically because of the whole of society approach that's followed by the RCEP program and the methodology. Then it's also important to note that we do an internal review of the program, but because it's earmarked funding, we also subjected to specific annual oversight and evaluation by Provincial Treasury. But in 2019-20, we also did an external evaluation was also undertaken. And yes, in terms of impact, our funding, we're trying to crowd in with our funding, so we're trying to leverage a co-funding by others. So in fact, if you look at our information, we've managed to with our funding, leverage the same amount or more than our funding from the partners. So the total funding, if you look at the partners crowding in, is double, more than double our funding in terms of our contribution. And then just maybe quickly, just as an indication, there's so many projects, but just in 2019-20, the year under consideration, we were busy delivering. If I just look at maybe Worcester, in Worcester, the town itself, the Mtawazi Street landscaping project. In Toes River, there was a pedestrian bridge, there was 3 netball courts, there was an AstroTurf mini pitch. In Saldanha, there was the George Kerridge commercial node. So tangible projects, but also very specific benefits in terms of relationships with community and co-ownership of these projects. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you, HOD. I don't know, our program manager, Francois Wist, whether he also wants to come in. Francois?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gerber. HOD, I can just add to clarify the numbers. It was 13 and the number of municipalities that we were active in. And then as the VPUU component of the program came to an end, those 3 municipalities were subtracted, and then it was to 10. But we, as HOD has mentioned, we are back in 2 of those municipalities. So for the next year, the number of municipalities is back to 12, although we're not in the city of Cape Town per se. But yes, I think also in terms of the evaluation, the formal or comprehensive independent evaluation, it found that the program is definitely cost effective in comparison to any other similar program. And they've done a lot of interviews with communities, so we had very positive feedback from the formal evaluation. Thank you.
HOD, just to add, if I may, just to stress the fact that although we, in the same number of municipalities for OSIP, because of the austerity measures and the budget cuts, because it's earmarked funding, it's not permanent allocation, we can't go as deep in terms of those municipalities. So, and one can see that if one looks at the overall amounts, and you'll see it over time in terms of our evaluation reports, that it's fewer projects that do not go as deep in those specific municipalities. So we're still there with those municipalities, but because of the budget having been cut by Provincial Treasury or drastically reduced, we can't go quite as deep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you respond, Mr. Van Zyl, I see Honorable Maseku has raised her hand again.
No, sorry, Chair, is for the second round after they've answered.
Thank you. Then over to you, Mr. Van Zyl.
Chair, I think we've covered the ground in terms of both your 2 questions as well as Member Maseku's initial question. So we're back in your hands.
Thank you. Over to you, Honorable Maseku.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just the last question, I think, from me. In the special transformation, I think from the strategic plan, the interesting and the very nice initiatives is one of the Know Your Municipality and the theory of change. I just want to find out, in the planned performance, is the department on track, or the impact of the pandemic will deter the speed anticipated for these initiatives to move forward? Because it's one of those initiatives that I was thinking that they are going to really make an impact to really mitigate the risk that is there for our special transformation, especially in the municipalities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maseku, and I can see you're wearing the hat also as Chair of Human Settlements there. Mr. Van Zyl.
Chair, thank you. I'm going to ask Francois, perhaps Francois Wist, to give the bulk of the answer, but I think as Gerard just mentioned a moment ago, that because we've had to spread the Marmite on the slice of toast a little bit thinner to be able to eat that slice of toast slightly longer, budget-wise, that is, of course. I think that there has been some disruption, but perhaps Francois can particularly reflect on the projects that were on our schedule for completion this year. And I think in particular the completion, and mindful of the lockdown and how that caused also a lockdown in construction activity. A number of the projects in our municipalities were in construction stages and therefore disrupted for a while. But I think it's pleasing to say that, or to note and report that in the last couple of weeks almost, Minister Bradell has been able to officiate with the mayors concerned, both down in Mossel Bay and also in Cape Agulhas. But Francois, do you want to just briefly reflect on the momentum of our RCEP program and how COVID has impacted on that?
Thank you, Mr. Wist.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and HOD. Yes, it was actually very amazing for us to see the momentum, how it was regained after the lockdown. I think all the contractors were also keen to get to work and get their staff and personnel on the sites again. So there was a flurry of activities. And to a large extent, all the lost time was recovered. So just in terms of spatial transformation as well, I think the program, RCEP specifically, is focusing on a lot of the infill and stitching together of parts of towns. And we had about 3 or 4 towns where that was illustrated or came together very effectively. And it's also to show the municipalities that it can be done and to give them the confidence or the tools to do it. In some cases, the towns are so separated that it is not almost impossible to do it. And but we then focus on upliftment projects in what we call forgotten neighborhoods. And also in terms of long distances that people have to walk to work and to the main town, to economic opportunities. So there's definitely an impact. Yeah, we're happy that it's going out to now to 12 municipalities. And there's a lot of appreciation from the municipalities and the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wist, and thank you, Mr. Van Zyl. Mr. Van Zyl, I trust it's in order if I would then move on to Cape Nature.
Okay, thank you very much. And we were happy to be able to respond and fill in on the content of our annual report. So from my side, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I trust that you will stay on for the concluding remarks later on. And with that, I want to hand over first to Professor Denver Hendricks, the chair of the board of Cape Nature. Professor Hendricks, thank you very much for joining us here today as well. And thank you for all the work that you do when we don't see you, and for your oversight role that you play there. And then also, I want to give you an opportunity for a few remarks and trust that you will then hand over to Dr. Omar for her introductory remarks. But you're most welcome, and we look forward to listening to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you as the Portfolio Committee. Honourable members of the Portfolio Committee, Minister Bradell, the HOD of the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, staff members of that department, the CEO of Cape Nature, staff members of Cape Nature and members of the audience. We're pleased to present Cape Nature's 2019-2020 annual report. We just had a bit of a slight echo and we managed to sort that out, so thank you for those present in the room. So to continue with my address, unfortunately the events of 2020 in the form of the COVID-2019 pandemic and the associated social and economic impacts threaten to cloud our perspective of the events of the 2019-2020 financial year, which is currently under review. However, I'm very delighted to report that Cape Nature has achieved all our 4 strategic goals for the entity, part of this being reflected in the unqualified audit report we were given for 2019-2020. Having said this, I wish to reflect that this achievement would not have been possible without the hard work and dedication of all our staff on the ground in Cape Nature, the CEO, Dr. Omar, and a team of executive directors who provided leadership and managed Cape Nature very effectively, my fellow Cape Nature board members for their support and wise counsel, our partners, Mr. Van Zyl, HOD of the department, their senior management team and staff who provided willing support at all levels. And then finally, I wish to acknowledge the continued support and active engagement from Minister Bredell as we work towards addressing our mandate. So looking forward, I'm quite concerned about the effects of COVID-19 and the associated economic impact on our ability to manage our mandate, which is to be responsible for nature conservation in the Western Cape. And so with this caveat, I now conclude my address, noticing that everybody tries to be as concise and brief as possible in this meeting, and now allow the annual report to speak for itself, and we'll endeavor to address any questions which may be raised. The CEO, Dr. Omar, will coordinate the responses from Cape Nature as we go forward. Thank you for this opportunity to address you, and I now hand over to Dr. Omar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Omar.
Good afternoon, members, Minister, and colleagues. I just want to start off by concurring. By concurring with the overview provided by Minister Bredell and followed by HOD Van Zyl. Just to latch on to their introductory remarks, in particular Minister Bredell's introductory remarks regarding the myriad of challenges that we're facing, but also just celebrating once again a clean audit report as an introduction. The entity is mandated to manage and protect our rich, internationally recognized biodiversity in the Western Cape. And in the delivery of this mandate, the entity drew on strong leadership and support, rigorous strategic planning, from which our APP was developed, monitored, and now reported on. In the current year under review, Cape Nature continued to strengthen good governance and achieved good results in the past financial year that resulted in another unqualified clean audit outcome, as we have done for the past 5 years. In this regard, the entity set 17 indicators distributed through 4 programs and achieved 100% of the predetermined objectives for the 4th consecutive year. The year on which we are reporting, honourable members, 2019-20, marks the final one in the 5-year strategic cycle that commenced in 2015. And it is with great pride that we look back on these 5 years at some of the aspects that has been achieved. For example, I refer you to the conservation estate that is under our custodianship, that comprises the total hectares of land surface area of the Western Cape managed by our entity. And I just want to point out that it has increased by a further 9.361 hectares for the period under the review, bringing the total estate just to over 1 million hectares. This is a milestone for us because every year as a team we said not yet 1 million, not yet 1 million, and we are there after 5 years. Considering the managing of our protected areas, the entity applies the new management effectiveness strategy to monitor and assess how well we manage our protected areas to conserve our biodiversity. A MET score of 67% is set as a minimum requirement by national government for that indicates effective management. Internally, Cape Nature sets a target of 74%, which is much higher than that set by national. And I'm pleased to say that we overachieved this target with a score of 87%. In terms of our social investments, the entity has generated 1,568 work opportunities against the target of 1,000, and we managed to employ FTEs coming from communities in close proximities to our nature reserves, which are aligned with the poverty nodes, to the total of 528. And that's against a target of 450. The youth is also very high on our agenda, and considering our youth development in the province, the Youth Environmental Services Program provided a 20 million injection of funding into the province over the past 2 financial years and allowed 231 youth to participate in capacity building and job creation programs. These learners received mentorship from our staffs, skill development through various tertiary institutions, because these are accredited courses in various disciplines, and a monthly stipend and a platform for development through Cape Nature, with funding from the national government, National Department of Environmental, Forestries and Fisheries. For a 5th consecutive year, despite the economic downturn, honourable members, the tourism revenue generated by the entity exceeded its target. It grew year on year, and this year 21%. From our target set of 37 million, we achieved 42 million for the period under review, thus allowing more resources to be earmarked for operational conservation requirements. Cape Nature's total revenue generated amounted to 396 million for the period under review. In this regard, 314 million was received from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning through the Provincial Treasury, and the remaining funds were generated from other funders and own revenue. Our own revenue streams in this regard include our tourism fees from licenses and permits, as well as interest received. And these exceeded projections, with tourism activities being the biggest contributor. The entity is proud to announce that it spent 99% of its budget on the accrual basis and 98% on the cash basis. In terms of the latter, last year we achieved a 94% expenditure on a cash basis, which is an improvement, a market improvement this year. The under expenditure, I want to point out, was due to capital infrastructure projects, since contractors could not be allowed on site for the last month due to our reserve shutting down, and therefore we have 22 million rands of commitments, largely finishing touches to projects that were started during the course of during the financial year. Honourable members, I acknowledge with gratitude the guidance received from Minister Bredell, the Western Cape Nature Conservation Board through under the leadership of Professor Hendricks, this particular standing committee of Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, other departments, both national and provincial, and in particular the HOD, Mr. Van Sail, and staff of the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning for the ongoing and highly valued support. And in conclusion, last but not least, to all our Cape Nature staff for all their hard work and dedication during the period under review that brought us to a point where we received all our targets, spent all our budgets, and got a clean audit. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. With that, our members, over to you for any questions that you may have regarding the annual report. Can I ask that you again indicate by show of hands? In the absence of, yes, thank you, Honorable Maseku. You can go first, and then Honorable Maran.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And it's, Cape Nature all the time. It's quite an interesting entity to. We always look forward to listen to the passion of Dr. Omar and he speak, like talking about a baby that is growing while she's watching it growing and mitigating all the challenges, but still just embracing every challenge that is there. So thank you very much, Dr. Omar. I always had to say this. Always look forward to listen to you. Going back to the questions, Chair, I don't have a lot of questions. It's just one that I want to find out, because the Cape Nature, the pandemic, I think what happened to it is the issue of how do they mitigate the risk of the technology and using the technology so that they can maximize to generate revenue in running of the entity itself, and also the partnerships, because also it depends on creating partnerships in running this entity. How is the pandemic impacted on this, and how are they mitigating that that challenge within the entity to make sure that they can still sustain it, that moving forward we see it generating revenue to the anticipated percentage that they were seeing that they can achieve with their 5-year strategic plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maseku. Honorable Maran.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Chair, I actually got only one question, but before I get to my question, we would like to express appreciation for the hard work done by Cape Nature under the guidance of the Department of Environmental Affairs, Chair. Chair, the issue of the pandemic, Chair, I think that in the coming, because we are dealing with the previous financial year, which is basically under review, and maybe within the next year, this time when we're going to deal with the annual report, we will basically then the impact that the pandemic had on this department. I've heard that the target set, I think it was 37 million, has been exceeded, and with and the income was actually I think, if I'm not mistaken, the CEO correctly, just over 40 million rand. Chair, I just want to check on page 85, table 22, employment and vacancies per program, specifically program 2 by biodiversity capabilities. And I think, Chair, that the Cape Nature will perform so much better if they can deal basically with the issue that we are the issue of vacancies, and in this specifically program it's 63%, but it's actually a bit high, Chair. We have heard, Chair, that even when we have dealt basically with the adjustment budgets and the cut now last week, and the cuts in revenue, not revenue, monies that they have to surrender, even includes funds that was meant to fill vacancies or to fill posts, Chair. Here we are seeing a vacancy rate of 63%, and we would like to understand, because I am of the view they will perform so much better if these vacancies could have been filled. The reason why it has not been filled, Chair. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. And if I heard you correctly, you were referring there to table 22 on page 85. And
Correct, Chair.
I've also got questions. Yes, I've also got questions regarding some of those figures. There's a figure of 605 employees, which then suddenly decreased to 114 employees, and another category that went up. So, Dr. Umar, if you or one of your staff members would like to explain that to us, I'll really appreciate that. Dr. Umar, from my side, just a few questions as well, and congratulations on the clean audits. My one focus is regarding the youth bursaries, etc. Perhaps you can just tell us what is the future of the Youth Environmental Services Program, and to what extent do you cooperate with WCED? We've just heard from the department that they have engaged the WCED in that e-learning program. And to what extent are you cooperating and making reserves available for educational visits, etc.? Then also, in the same vein, to what extent are you also supporting research? I do see that you've made some bursaries available, but it seems to me as if research that are really related to the work of Cape Nature could be of great value to the work that you are doing as Cape Nature. So perhaps if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about that. Then the second question is regarding the Executive Director Corporate Services, which was vacant at the end of the previous financial year. Perhaps you can just bring us up to speed with where we are, and are we welcoming that newly appointed Executive Director to our meeting here today? And then the last, no, not the last one. The next question is regarding your job creation. And congratulations on a good growth in the tourism figures and budgets. But what we are not seeing is to what extent have your tourism offer increased? I mean, it's all good and well to say that you've grown by a certain percentage, but if the number of beds that you offer have also increased, it doesn't help us to really put that into perspective. So perhaps if you could just tell us, for example, what are your changes in occupation rates? And obviously I'm referring for the year up to the end of March, and not the current year, which I think we must all evaluate against the effect of COVID, etc. And then also in terms of that, the tourism and the turnover and the tourism figures, I see that Cape Nature has been quite innovative, and I appreciate that you also now have Black Friday sales, and I've been privy to some discussions among people saying that they made use of this Black Friday offer. Are you convinced that this offer of yours has had the effect to lead to better occupancy rates, or does it actually represent a loss of income? So, Chair, with that, I first would like to, Chair, to the Chair of the Council and then also to the CEO, I would like to hand back to you to respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honourable members, for these questions. I will take it one by one. Firstly, and then just ask certain of the staff members to respond. They are all online. Firstly, just thank you very much to Honourable Maseko and Honourable Maran and yourself for the vote of confidence in the work that the entity is doing. We appreciate that very much, and obviously we are just trying our best and just trying to improve as we go along. In terms of the pandemic and how we're mitigating it, this is new territory for all of us, and we had to make plans as we speak, as the months went by since March. In fact, just the beginning of March, when we got a whiff of the pandemic, we started making plans on how to mitigate, how to continue our work. Fortunately, for the past 2 years, we were already in a process of scaling up our ICT initiatives and automating, etc. So that's really stood us in good stead to be able to ride this wave, the first wave of the pandemic. Sorry for the pun, but I'm going to ask the two executive directors, Shiraz Ismail, to just give us some idea on how we managed with our stakeholders in particular and the pandemic in terms of partnerships and also the ICT terrain, the technology, the fourth industrial revolution. And I'm also going to ask after that just Mohammed Bayat, our CFO, who's driving ICT in the entity, also just to give us a broader view in terms of supply chain and all those other areas, working from home, and he will elaborate on that. So that is as far as Honorable Maseko's questions are concerned. In terms of Honorable Maran's questions, the 40 million tourism income, the executive director will respond to that. But the vacancies, and I'm just going to elaborate on that after just focusing on the vacancies. Table 22 is a new table that we had to comply with in terms of the prescripts coming in from .P and Treasury. And our HR General Manager will elaborate on Table 22 because there were quite a few questions, and Rowena Vaughan, she will talk you through Table 22. In terms of the youth bursaries, I know, Chair, from your side, you zoomed into the Youth Environmental Services program. Unfortunately, this program is being discontinued by the National Department. So it is most unfortunate because this was a very, very good program where we saw youth really being developed, capacitated, and of the 200 and odd youth that went through the program, we are actually proud to say that we could offer temporary employment to some, but a permanent employment to one of those students that went through the program. So yes, it's not going to be continued. Western Cape Education Department collaboration, that is ongoing, and Shiraz will also speak about the initiatives in that regard. Supporting research related to our work, we do have scientists doing it, and Coral Burst will give us a snapshot as to our research portfolio, some of which is articulated in the annual report, especially our international and local publications, peer-reviewed journals, etc. But she will give us more on that. And Rowena will also talk about the corporate services vacant position, but there's not much to talk about there, Chair. We are looking at austerity measures. We went through a substantial review, and that position, we haven't taken it off our establishment as yet, but it is at the moment still frozen, with the bulk of the work being done through the strategy, governance and risk unit, and at the moment with much success. So we are monitoring it, and should it be necessary for us to resuscitate that post, that is one of the first positions that we will unlock. Then the ecotourism portfolio and the suite of questions in terms of offerings. Shiraz is going to talk about that. Offerings in terms of including occupation rates and also the success or a non-success of a Black Friday. And I'll hand it over in that for succession to the executive. So Shiraz, you can go first. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Madam CEO. Thank you, honorable members and Chair. I think I'll start off with the first question around the use of technology. And as the CEO has mentioned, you know, the COVID pandemic has really forced us to think in a very different manner and adopt a complete different approach to how we're doing things. I think one of the first things we had to do was how do we enhance our online booking system? Because, you know, predominantly it used to just cater for self-catering accommodation. Today you can do campsite bookings on it, you can buy hiking permits on it, and that was part of the evolution. But I think due to COVID, we were forced to make those things happen much quicker than anticipated. We also obviously had to roll out the entire regime with regards to visitor safety at our facilities. And I'm also glad to indicate to the members that we actually have an international certification indicating that Cape Nature adheres to all international protocol and visitor safety when it comes to our clients visiting our reserves. I think the other form of technology that we've also are forced to embrace is that how do we make use of third-party booking portals? There's a myriad of them. There's Airbnb, there's Booking.com, there's Lekkerslap, and not just depend on people visiting the Cape Nature portal, but also looking at other third-party booking portals, because by doing this, we attract a whole new client database that would not normally book with Cape Nature. So that's another way we're using technology. With the environmental education activities, as well as the capacity building capabilities, that was also challenging. And this, because all our stakeholder engagement officers, when they engage with schools and other stakeholders, those were face-to-face contact sessions. Either the school comes out to the nature reserve or the Cape Nature staff visits schools on site. But obviously, because of COVID, this was not possible. And then what we did do is we actually put together an entire range and series of online engagements, which actually turned out to be very, very viable, where we get tens of thousands of people participating on an online platform, so that we still continue creating and servicing the public out there. And this was very, very well received by the members of the public, the schools, and so on. So just from my side, that is how we embrace technology and how COVID has forced us to do things differently. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam CEO.
Mohammed?
Thank you.
Yep. No problem. Thanks, Chairperson, and thanks to everybody. I think just quickly in terms of how we've also embraced technology on the tourism front, we're busy with our point of sale system rollout. We almost completed. We've got at least, I'm not at last count, I think 13 sites with point of sale technology, which allows for paperless transactions and the procurement of permits at the reserve. And we also accept cashless transactions as well. So we do have a Yoko device, so that if anybody wishes to pay with a smartphone or with a smartwatch or with even a card, we do allow for that now as well. There are a few very remote sites, and we're just busy working on some of the technology in terms of connectivity to get those sites up and running, and as well with other third-party vendors as well. So we do have that from a tourism perspective. From an operations perspective, what we've done in order to just be sustainable, when the initial stages of the lockdown were being touted, we immediately implemented emergency procurement. We procured laptops for staff that didn't have any laptops. We increased our data capacity with our service provider being Vodacom. We also managed to move a key server, that being our payroll server, off our local premises into the cloud, which therefore also allowed our payroll staff to get our payroll done, which is a critical function to ensure that the staff are paid. So there are a lot of innovations from that perspective. We're busy. We rolled out Microsoft Teams. We've managed to successfully migrate our servers also onto the Microsoft Exchange and Microsoft Cloud 365 options. So we're busy with a lot of these innovative technologies to ensure that we are embracing the fourth industrial revolution, and we can be sustainable and we can be competitive in our industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just in terms of Honourable Maran's question, I just want to, just before asking Rowena to come in and talk more on table 22, I realize that we do make that 40 million from our ecotourism and other revenue generation streams. However, those are largely already budgeted for, pre-budgeted for operational purposes. But there is a vacancy list that we normally manage. And whenever there is a staff member who leaves, there's a motivation from the broader executive as to what the priority post is that would be unlocked next. We always strive not to compromise our reserves at all. So field rangers and reserve management staff, those are crucial posts that are first catered for, notwithstanding the importance of the scientists. So there too, we are at the moment in the process of unlocking 2 key positions in that regard. But we try and manage a vacancy list to curtail our total cost of employment because it is capped going forward as well. So thank you, Chair, and I'm going to hand over to Rowena to talk about table 22 that and satisfy the questions that were posed by Honourable Maran and yourself. Over to you, Rowena.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honourable members and colleagues. In terms of table 22, I would like to firstly concur with what the CEO has said with regards to the vacancies, as well as prioritizing of the vacancy list. That is definitely one of the things that we always consider when filling positions. I'd like to go to the question around the number in program 1, 605 in our second column, and then in the fourth column we have 114. In the 2018-19 year, we had another program that housed all our FTEs. They formed part of program 1. That was our people and conservation portfolio that was housed under program 1. So at the end of 2018-19, that program has moved over to program 3. So you will see under program 3 in the 2019-20 year, 450 plus staff then moved over. So you have the total of 800. So at the end of the financial year, the end of March of the financial year, we had only 114 employed in program 1. So that explains the 605 from the previous year, and that number then has moved over to program 3. Just in addition to, and also just to further elaborate on program 3 and the vacancies, and just to concur again what the CEO has said, you would notice that in program 3 there's only 1% vacancy rate, because we definitely do try and fill all the positions, if not all, but most of the positions in operations, because that's our feet on the ground and that is where the work takes place within the entity as well. Thank you. I trust that answered the question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Umar. Can I give back to Honorable Maran because I see he's raised his hand, probably for a follow-up.
Chair, my hand was actually up before you have started with the responses because the issue of the 40 million rand, Chair, if I said if I have not the CEO, you understand it correctly, was a target set of 37 million rand, and they basically have exceeded their target with an income of 40 or more than 40 million rand. And therefore, Chair, mine was basically to express appreciation or to congratulate Cape Nature for exceeding that specific target, Chair. It was not a question, it was basically to congratulate them and in exceeding that particular target, Chair. Chair, just on the question that I've asked when it comes to that specific program, biodiversity, Chair, I know the response. Again, Chair, when we gonna deal with the annual reports a year from now, I will then remind the official of the response that she gave a year ago, Chair. So for now, Chair, I don't have really a follow-up question. I just want to clear the issue in terms of the 40 million rand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Maran. So it seems to me you say you will ask that question again. I must say, I think they appreciate getting so much notice of what you're going to ask next year.
No, Chair,
Dr. Umar.
Specifically the question that I've asked, which speaks to biodiversity, that specific program, and the issue of the vacancies and the response that I have received now. I'm saying, Chair, next year, Chair, because I've noticed when we have dealt with the second adjustment budget, that even Cape Nature, that some of the monies was surrendered to the Provincial Revenue Fund, and some of those monies was meant for COEs. So next year, Chair, the question will come up again, and I will keep the response that I have received now, and I will see then what will the response next year. I say it upfront so that the official knows. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Maran. Dr. Umar, I don't know if, yes, would you like to respond now to next year's question?
No, well, yes, Chair. As soon as there's more vacancies, staff leaving, Ms. Burrs will put forward her proposals, which will be evaluated. And obviously, they are a very important component and team of the entity integrated, and we will consider that as it goes. And it's also the smallness of the team that makes that 63 look so big. Smaller the component, and a vacancy makes it look huger than what it really is. But I acknowledge it, and I do undertake to respond to the Honorable Maran's question next year, and hopefully with a positive response in that regard, Chair. But there's still some questions that Shiraz will talk about the Western Cape Education Department collaboration. Coral Burrs is going to talk more about supporting research, specifically this particular component, the biodiversity research component. And then Shiraz will continue with the tourism offering and Black Friday, questions surrounding Black Friday. And if the committee want further insight or an extension to the bees, I was going to say the birds and the bees, but the bees and the polyphagous shuttle borer, I can always ask Dr. Bart and Coral Burrs to elaborate should there be follow-up questions, Chair. Over now to Shiraz Ismail. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Well, yes, we do have a relationship with the Western Cape Education Department. We work very close with their subject advisors at a district level because a lot of our programs that involves environmental education and awareness is aligned to the curriculum of the Western Cape Education Department. So yes, there is a relationship, but like any other relationship, I do believe there's room for improvement. And I know that this coming Thursday, there is a meeting set between ourselves, DEDP, and the Western Cape Education Department to strengthen and take this relationship to a next level. With regards to our environmental education centers, Grootvadersbos as well as Vrolikheid Environmental Education Centers during this accounting period received extensive renovations and upgrades. We've also looked at the whole new pricing regime where we literally going to zero rate poorer schools wanting to come visit our facilities. And, you know, as they've got a different stepping with regards to how schools are classified, and your more affluent schools will pay a small premium, nothing too much, but it's really about creating access for all communities, irrespective. Yeah, so that's just it from an education department, and also what we're doing in the space with regards to our environmental education centers. I think another strategy from our side is to open it not just only for schools, but there are many NGOs, church groups, football clubs, youth clubs, is to open up those facilities to all the citizenry of the Western Cape, and to different forums and associations and so forth. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Omar. We're back in your hands.
Over to Ms. Burrs, Coral, the research support and what's going on to support our work.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Good afternoon to the Honourable Chair and the Honourable members. In response to the question around, I'm going to take it as our role in research. So Cape Nature particularly is not a research facility, so our in-house research capability is limited, although we rely extensively on research outcomes. So we focus on facilitating and collaborating on research, and we engage the research agenda via a number of biodiversity symposia in South Africa, particularly the Conservation Symposium, the Department of Environmental Affairs and Forestry National Annual Symposium on Biodiversity Research, the South African Wildlife Management Association, etc. And then we have a number of research associations with tertiary institutions, Stellenbosch University of the Western Cape, and SIAB, which is the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, affiliated with Grahamstown University. And then also a number of collaborations with various universities and national bodies like the South African National Biodiversity Institute, again, SIAB, or the South African Earth Observation Network, that is SAON, and then various NGOs, BirdLife South Africa, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, Table Mountain Fund, Worldwide Fund for Nature South Africa, and a couple of others. So it's we engage fully, and we have a number of successful collaborations in research. And then when we have permit applications for people who apply for research permits, in other words, to collect samples of specimens, we specifically look at facilitating research outcomes that will enable or promote biodiversity conservation. Thank you.
Dr. Omar?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Omar. Yeah, again, just on the occupancy. And very nice.
Yes,
so, yeah, in Cape Nature,
you're sitting in the same room, so you must please just put the extra computer on silent, please.
Okay, we just Is that better, Mr. Chair?
Problem solved. Thank you, Mr. Ismail. Please
here we go.
proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, in Cape Nature, it really varies from product to product. If you look at a product like, for example, Kochelberg, where you have a 84% occupancy rate throughout the year, you could also have a product like Rochepan that has got a 55% occupancy. So a lot of our marketing activity is really geared now towards how do we increase that occupancy. And there's also in the Western Cape is very different compared to the northern side of the country in that, you know, our weather condition is harsh. Winters are cold, it's rainy. Our type of activity is more your outdoor active type of product offering. You know, so Cape Nature is not the only operator in the tourism space that deals with the seasonality that we're having to deal with. But a lot of our marketing efforts now is geared towards how do we increase those occupancies. So for example, school holidays, long weekends, generally over weekends, we don't have a problem with getting bums in beds. A challenge for us is literally that Monday to Thursday period. You know, everybody's in work, kids are in school. How do we address that? And then we've got various campaigns that we run throughout the year to drive those interventions. Black Friday is actually one of them that we drive. And if you notice, the Black Friday special is not across all our products. It's actually to push products where we do have low occupancy and to get more bums in beds into those products. And I must say, Mr. Chair, if I just go back, when we started Black Friday in 2017, we had a total of 128 bookings. 2018, we had a total of 208 bookings. And 2019, we actually nearly doubled that. We had 411 bookings just because of Black Friday. And obviously, it's based on occupancy and having that occupancy drive, and also generating revenue for the organization. And even with the discounts that we are offering, it's still not running at a loss. We are still making money on it. And it's also a nice way of diversifying, you know, getting new people on board, because everyone's looking for a good Black Friday deal. And Black Friday is one of those campaigns that we've seen year-on-year growth and engagement with clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail. Perhaps if you can now switch off your mic, loudspeaker, and then hand back to Dr. Umar.
Thank you, Chair. The last two questions was just to offer if should the committee want any particular perspective on the short border from Cape Nature. Aaron's can talk about that, and about the bees, coral bursts can talk about that, because only recently at our recent board meeting we just approved our bee policy. So she will be able to add some perspective as articulated by Marlene, but that's only if. Chair, over to you.
Please hand over to those two. Dr. Bart, you first thing. I think this is a unique opportunity for us to learn more about your work.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, honourable members and everybody in the House. Thank you for the question. I think suffice to say that the polyphagous shot-hole borer is a real problem in South Africa at the moment. It is spreading. But fortunately, it appears as if it is relatively contained to mostly our urban areas. But the situation in the Western Cape, and specifically in the Boland area, is relatively contained. I think the most recent records for the shot-hole borer and impacted trees or vegetation has been seen in the Helleberg Nature Reserve area in the Somerset West area specifically. But at the moment, I am happy to report that at the time of printing the annual report, Chair, Cape Nature we have not, despite all the protocols that we have been trained in to detect the borer, to get some samples and to send it away and deal with it. We have not had any formal and positive infections or infestations in any of our nature reserves. We have about 5 or 6 of our more wooded nature reserves like Outeniqua, Grootvadersbos, and some of the Kogelberg area that have been identified as potential hotspots, but we have had no positive reports from any of these reserves. And then just finally, the situation is as also described in the annual report, that it seems as if the main vector for spread of this shot-hole borer, this little goga, is about the size of a sesame seed. Despite the fact that they can fly, the spread of this beetle is through infected wood that is being moved around in terms, and also in the shape and form of wooden pallets or briar wood or anything like that. We have also, in these nature reserves, we have put a moratorium on bringing any own firewood from outside. So where we can supply wood from uninfected areas, we will supply that to visitors. But then also in return for handing in potentially infected firewood, we then offer a bag of charcoal, which is then in mitigation of the risk and actually managing the risk. So, Chair, I think with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then is it Mr. Beurs?
Yes. Thank you, Honourable Chair. In relation to the state of honeybees, in the past, had nature acknowledged that honeybee hives would be placed in a variety of areas in the fynbos and allowed the commercial keeping of honeybees on protected areas. But in acknowledging the importance of maintaining resilient populations of honeybees, we've recently approved a policy that now prevents the placement of any commercial bee hives on any of the nature reserves. So it prevents the bringing in of any bees. It also prevents the taking out of any natural bee populations from reserves, and only allows for us to relocate within a nature reserve where it may interfere with a tourism facility, aimed specifically at safeguarding wild bee populations that are resilient, to thereby support apiculture outside nature reserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. Does that conclude the speakers that you would like?
Yes, indeed, Chair. That concludes the responses to all the questions. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Umar. Honourable members, are there any further questions, any follow-up questions from your side? Dr. Umar, then just 2 questions from my side then. The first one is regarding your interaction with private sector partners in some areas. I have learned that, for example, you make facilities available. For example, I think in the I don't know if it's the Jonkershoek Reserve, Nieuweberg is the entrance point, for example, for a zipline operator. I don't know if they're still active. And then also there's I think the Hoop collection, where you have partnered with local entrepreneurs, and also, as far as I believe, there is one of the guest houses in the Hoop Reserve where you've also partnered with a private partner who then invested some money in the upgrading of the property, and has now the right to manage and generate an income for the next few years from that facility. Perhaps if you could just tell us a little bit more about your approach to these private-public partnerships. And then my last question, You've mentioned that you are now at the end of your 5-year strategic plan. Perhaps if you would just share with us, how do you go about in now renewing that 5-year strategic plan? Where do you get your inputs from? What are the factors that you will be taking into account? And in general, what is your process that you follow? And do you perhaps foresee a completely different strategic plan going forward? Thank you. And if in the absence of other hands, honorable members, if we could make that then the last 2 questions to Dr. Omar and her team. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. In terms of the PPP partners and other partnerships, these are largely linked to our ecotourism and access component. As an introduction there, I would ask Shiraz Ismail just to elaborate on the 7 PPP partnerships at the WIP that we have currently, and the concessionaires like the ziplining and others too, that is outside of the WIP. So he will talk more about that, and in particular the particular house that you mentioned. I will just very briefly respond to the strategic plan. So this is year 1 of the new strategic plan as we sit here currently. There's a particular process that's been prescribed by Treasury and .P that how we get to the development of the strategic plan in partnership with the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, who provides oversight in that regard, and our board. And it is signed off by the minister. So what can you expect? Our core business remains our core business, but as an entity, one also you grow and you target you become a bit smarter. Your indicators are smarter. Some of the targets are merged, where we saw that it was illogical to separate things, etc. So it's a rigorous process that actually starts a year in advance and goes through various iterations before we get to the point of implementation, Chair. So nature conservation is nature conservation with a focus on the protection of our biodiversity within the Western Cape. And also being an entity, one cannot underscore the need to be sustainable going forward. But I must just add, with COVID, as we heard, it has given us a knock, and we did articulate it in our annual report that whereby we projected that we will be able to, based on last year's target, generate revenue to the total of 43 million. We're nowhere near half of that for obvious reasons. So what we have done already was to look at the process, which we spoke about a week or 2 ago through the standing committee, to also talk about the tabling of the indicators. In year 1, there were 2 that we had to revise downwards, and the one on tourism income was the one that we had to abolish for this year. But going forward, so this is a totally new ball curve that was thrown at us, but we'll see as we go forward how this unfolds through the next 4 years, Chair. So over to Shiraz to talk more about the PPP partnerships and the concessionaires. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The WIP PPP started as early as 2002, 2003. And at the time, the board, Cape Nature Board, together with their CEO, looked at alternative revenue streams, and this was seen as that opportunity where we can get private sector people on board to invest in nature reserves, where both parties could actually make money, them making the investment and them getting a return on that investment, but also for the entity to derive some revenue generation through that avenue. Over the years, we've implemented a number of PPPs at the Whoop Nature Reserve. Prior to COVID, I think they were all doing relatively well. We were out there about a month ago, the CEO and myself, and we actually saw the uptake of local and domestic travel again, and the PPP partners is having to bite the bullet on this particularly. But I think from where we're standing, it is a model. The project was implemented by Cape Nature with the support of national and provincial treasury, because they are the custodians of tourism PPPs in the province and in the country. And those projects were implemented under their guidance and leadership. Then we do have a number of concession opportunities. For example, the one at Hottentots Holland Nature Reserve, and that is with Canopy Tours. That is the zipline concession. And then we have a number of other smaller concessions that we also operate. And how do we go about this? We actually put out an ad in all major newspapers where we ask operators in the sector to actually send us proposals. Those proposals are evaluated, not just based on the revenue the business can generate, but also what is the benefit for the public entity, because we also need to sustain ourselves. I think in the next week or two, there's one of those ads are going out again, where we allow for private sector partners to submit proposals. Those proposals are evaluated, and based on the credibility of the proposals, we would then make an award with regards to those concessions. And they are working very, very well for us, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And while they switch loudspeakers, Dr. Umar, is there anything that you would like to add?
The chair is on mute.
Dr. Umar, anything that you would like to add?
No, there's nothing more, Chair. Just Mr. Ishmael outlined the PPP partnerships at the WIRP, and he also zoomed into the zipliners. Just to say that the duration of the partnership is also outlined, and after that, whatever infrastructure was developed at the nature reserve then comes over to the entity, and that's how we gain. And we also gain annually. If they do well, our revenue increases. So there's a percentage sharing, and he outlined that. So thank you, Chair. From our side, thank you very much for listening to us, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar, and thank you to everybody who's been part of this meeting, particularly those that responded to our many questions. And with that, we've come to the part where we, as a committee, are able to proceed on our own. And therefore, before I give you an opportunity to close and to log off, I would like to say again, thank you very much, Honourable Minister, to you and your team, to our officials, both from the department under the leadership of Mr. Van Zyl, and the entity with our chair there, Professor Hendricks, and our CEO, Dr. Umar. From my side, I want to say thank you very much. Looking back on this year, some of you have mentioned it has been an abnormal year, and it has taken its toll. It has put a lot of demands on particularly those in management, senior staff like yourselves. And I want to therefore say thank you very much for the way in which you responded to the pandemic and the new challenges. I think we all in the Western Cape can be extremely proud of our public servants and the way in which you responded and dealt with uncharted territory. I hope that for most of you, there will be some form of rest in the days to come, that at least over the festive days, you would be able to spend some time with beloved ones. And I therefore wish you all a really festive time. Honourable members, and before we as a committee proceed with our resolutions or actions and details of our next meeting, before we say goodbye to a number of you, I would like to just mention the fantastic support that we as a committee received from our procedural officer, Ms. Shireen Nikak, where there were mistakes made. They were all my own, and it was often against the advice. And where we've seen successes and smooth running of meetings, it was all due to her. So all credit to Ms. Nikak, and those of you that deal with her regularly, I'm sure you will confirm what I've just said. So thank you very much. Committee members, if you would remain on. And with that, just the last word over to you, MEC Bradell, if you would like to conclude from your side.
Well, thank you, Chairperson. From our side, I want just allow me again to thank Piet van Zyl and his team and Dr. Oma and her team. You can see the intellect, the competencies within this department makes us proud. Our environment, biodiversity is in good hands. And for you as chair and your committee, thank you very much. Thank you for your oversight role. Thank you for keeping us on our toes. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I do hope whoever's microphone has been on, that it is somebody making coffee for you there in the background.
Klinkt soos 'n helikopter wat opstyg.
Okay. So thank you very much. Also, yes, you've just referred to the helicopter. MEC Bradell is also responsible for disasters. And I must tell you, I've been quite impressed by the way in which they've dealt with fires over the last weekend amidst very strong winds here. And I think Dr. Bart, who resides in Somerset West, will also have watched this quite closely. I think we were all impressed by that response. So thank you very much, honourable members. If you would be so kind just to stay online for a few more minutes for us just to deal with potential resolutions. And again, to you one and all, thank you very much. Go well, and we'll meet up in the new year. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Good.
Thank
Honourable
you.
members,
Bye.
we now have an opportunity for you to provide input on key findings, issues that you would like to raise, concerns, or any other matter that you would like to include in the report. If we do take decisions, please let's be specific, let's be realistic, and let's also keep in mind whether it can be dealt with within the time available. So, honourable members, can I see by show of hands, are there any resolutions, any concerns, anything that you would like Ms. Nikak to include in the report on today's deliberations? Thank you, Honourable Maseko. I see your hand.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, there's only one resolution, I think, from me that I missed. I think maybe when they were when they were responding to us. I wanted to find out the challenges that the department is facing in the influencing the legislation from national of the waste management, because in their annual report they're saying that maybe if we can get it in writing, what is the challenge that is there about that. That's all from me that I have.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko, and thank you very much for a brilliant input. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind, perhaps we can make it a little bit wider so that Ms. Nikak, and with the indulgence of the committee, if we could get feedback from the department on the additional burden or the additional responsibilities that are put onto the province, and obviously then this provincial department and its entity by the additional legislation or new legislation at national level regarding the environment. Honorable Maseko, would it be fine if we take it wider than just waste management, but also other pieces of legislation?
Yeah, it's fine, but this one was just specific of the in risk mitigation. They feel, the department feels that the legislation will empower them to deal with the waste management problems. But the reason that national, they don't get a buy-in from national, that's where it's stopping them in maximizing in dealing with the waste management for that legislation. So it was that. But any way that we can tweak, as long as at the end we can get the answer, I don't have a problem.
Good. Thank you very much. And Honorable Maseko, yesterday morning during the local government committee's meeting, I asked about also questions regarding, or the challenges regarding solid waste management, particularly at local government level, because I think we've all been to communities where we see that unfortunately there are piles of waste, and often heavy construction equipment needs to be brought in to deal with that. So thank you very much for that. I think the whole issue of the managing of waste is a very important one. Honourable members, any other aspects that you would like to raise? Good. None at this time. Honourable Maran, I see your microphone is on. Anything from your side?
Close it, Chair.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Honourable members, if that is the only additional resolution, then I would like to say thank you very much. Also, in the smaller group, I think you will all support me in thanking Ms. Nikak for her duties and for the way in which she has supported us as a standing committee. Secondly, I want to thank each and every one of you also for your support and cooperation during the past year. My wishes for the officials also apply to you, that you would also have time for rest. I do know tomorrow there's still a little bit of attention that should be given to some by-elections. So best of luck with that. And honourable members, from my side, again, I can't thank you enough for your contributions and especially the spirit that we could maintain in this committee, despite the fact that we may come from different political parties, etc. Thank you for all working towards a common goal, and that is to make a positive difference in the Western Cape for its citizens. This is then the last committee meeting for 2020. Our consideration of the report on the deliberation of these annual reports, that those meetings are scheduled for between the 2nd and the 4th of February next year. Exact times for those meetings will be communicated by the procedural officer beforehand. And honourable members, I don't know if there are any of you who would like to add anything apart from Honourable Maran's proposal that we close this meeting. If you would like to add something, then perhaps now is the time to do so. Good. Honourable members, again, in the absence of any hands, I'm now going to say thank you very much, and the meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair.